Marriage is supposed to be about love, right? But what happens when social and religious pressure start calling the shots?
In Sister Wives Season 19, Episode 7, we're seeing firsthand how these expectations can turn the beauty of a wedding into a battleground of beliefs and control.
Exactly. So today we're diving into the chaos that these pressures create, pushing people down paths they may not even want, and turning love into something complicated.
Let's talk about how this affects not just weddings, but the whole marriage.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I was raised in a family with 4 moms and 35 kids. We were members of the FLDS Church, which is a polygamous community run by their prophet, Warren Jeffs, who is now serving a life sentence in prison.
I was raised mainstream LDS in Utah. Sam and I have been married for 10 years and have 2 awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. We want to quickly thank our donors, YouTube members, patrons on Patreon, and all of our amazing subscribers. We have a goal of reaching 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year, so if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yes, we are back at it with Sister Wives, and I have to say the theme of this entire episode came down to weddings, and the amount of control and pressure kind of was, I want to say it was more like sprinkled in there.
Yeah.
But that was the juicy stuff that we really wanted to get into today.
Exactly. A lot about weddings and the complications that come with weddings if you're feeling pressured into them.
Yeah. The first topic of weddings is definitely the fact that Christine and David are looking at wedding venues just 6 weeks. She said 6 weeks to 8 weeks into their relationship. And at first, Sam and I on the last episode, I was like, wait, they met in December and their wedding special was in January. But y'all remembered better than we did. It is a whole year later. They're just searching for venues, and then they are going to get married the following January.
Yes, and we'll get into our wedding experience a little bit later, but one of the reasons we assumed that they were married right after is because in our experience, and I feel like in Utah culture, it's pretty common to set a date, and I mean, and we're talking within a couple months here. Boom, you're married in the temple. Boom, you have a reception, sometimes in a chapel or wherever you can find some big space. It's not much planning in advance like we see here.
You don't plan for a whole year typically with LDS weddings. And part of that, I think, is the purity culture of being able to get married in the temple. There's no sex before marriage. So like Sam and I dated for 6 weeks. We got engaged and we were married 3 months later. And I remember our 3-month engagement feeling like the longest engagement in the history of ever. We have experience where we're like my brother and sister-in-law, they got engaged and married, like they got engaged and then married like 6 weeks later. And so like things can go very, very quickly. And especially when you're reserving like the temple rather than like a huge venue that can be booked out, years in advance. It's a lot different. But when they said, oh, we're moving super fast and it's 6 to 8 weeks, I'm like, oh, they probably are like getting the wedding together in 8 weeks.
That's what we assume.
But they are not.
But even though they did wait for a while to get married, they were moving fast in the sense that, hey, we've been dating for a few weeks and now we're looking for venues to get married. So they're making it look very serious already.
Yes, very, very quick in that way, in knowing. And, they mention the words, when you know, you know. And I remember when I was single, I hated that saying because I was like, that's just not true. Like, I don't know what these people are talking about. They're crazy. And then when Sam and I met, I mean, how long was it till we said I love you? I knew that I loved him like in 2 weeks. I think I wrote it in my journal.
I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, and I think we said I love you like 4 weeks into dating. Like
about
4 weeks from our first date. We said, I love you. And I remember my mom saying, the moment that he tells you that he loves you, we're wedding dress shopping. And we actually went and looked at wedding dresses secretly without telling him. Weeks before we got engaged, like as soon as he said love you, my mom's like, this is it. I know this is going to be it. Yeah, and then it was just 2 weeks later that we were engaged.
Yeah, it happened really, really very quickly. The funny thing is that in the moment, it didn't feel like it was moving that fast.
No.
So looking back now and with kids of our own, we were thinking, we were crazy. We would never.
Yeah. Our kids better not do that.
Our kids can't get. But when you are the young adult, you of course know everything, right? It's very easy and you know what you know. And we got very lucky, though. I feel like we hear stories of people that rush into things and then it just falls apart almost the second it comes together. So I feel like that we were very lucky and we just work well together. So it's been great.
Yeah. And we knew, right? When you know, you know. And
you
we
know,
knew.
you know.
And here we are 10 years later. But it is funny, too, to watch their kids, like, watching the dynamic between Christine and David and them finding each other. So cute. Obviously, there was a lot of comparison in this episode of this wedding for Christine versus her wedding with Cody, right? How can you not compare? And I think it was even Isabel who was saying, I'm trying not to compare them, but she's just really affectionate with David and she never was affectionate with my dad. Like, there's no way to not compare the two. And so she's talking about her wedding, and Cody also talks about it in a whole different light, which we'll get into in a second. But when she's talking about the fact that she came in as a third wife, that in the AUB, the first wife gets the wedding. They get the party. Everybody can know about it. And then after that, plural wives, it's just very, very small religious ceremony. Janelle talked about the fact she didn't even get like a wedding dress. She just wore a dress. They got married. And Christine now is getting to be prepared for this wedding of her dreams that she never was able to have.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. And I'm so excited for that experience for her. That's definitely something that I think is one of the first signs of like the religious pressure, right? Of it having to be a certain way because you're getting married within that religion. So in the AUB, you're a plural wife. It's going to be very small, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Right. In the mainstream LDS for us, having a temple marriage was the most important thing because that's how you're sealed for eternity. Well, that meant that my best friend, half of my bridesmaids, and my own father weren't allowed into the temple for that ceremony.
Which is the actual
marriage ceremony.
There is an after party, but the actual ceremony is in the temple.
Yeah. And my own dad wasn't able to be there. And you don't get to wear your wedding dress, you know? So I really related a lot with Christine on a lot of these things where she's like, you know, she did have a wedding dress, but now she gets to feel like a princess. And in the temple when we got married, I wasn't allowed to wear my wedding dress for our wedding ceremony. So my wedding dress was for pictures and for the reception. It wasn't for my actual wedding. And then, you know, not getting to have all of your loved ones there, even ones that were LDS, because that might be a question some people have is like, well, aren't other LDS members allowed in? Well, even my LDS family, particularly the girls, though, if they haven't served missions or they're not married themselves and haven't gone through the temple, through the endowment ceremony, they are not allowed in. So while I had friends that were LDS, they still had to wait outside the temple and were not allowed to be a part of my actual wedding ceremony. So Those are things that I just really related to Christine and made me like feel for her, and also made me feel so excited for her that she gets to have this other opportunity to be able to have the wedding that she dreams of. Or she probably didn't even have that dream. You know, she's talking about the fact that until Maddie had her wedding, and until, you know, Maddie and Aspen and McKelty had their weddings where they could see what a regular wedding even looked like, there was nothing else to compare it to. Plural wives, it was just this way, and first wives were this way. And so I think when she got to experience those other ones, I know I definitely still have that feeling a lot of times when we go to regular weddings. Like, my heart aches a little bit. My dad never got to walk me down the aisle, let alone even see me get married, like, breaks my heart. So I'm excited for Christine to be able to have that experience. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's sad. And I feel like a lot of people could relate to that similar thing, and probably not only within the Mormonism groups, right? Like, and this is something that maybe you guys can help us out, but it's complicated because I think back in the moment right now, I am very sad that you didn't get to have your dad walk you down the aisle, that you didn't have the wedding that would have been your childhood dream, you know, the wedding that you see other people have. But in the moment, because you believe the religious teachings and I guess you could say the pressure, or just the fact that everyone around you is so excited because you're getting a temple marriage. And so you're making everyone around you proud because they're also active members of the church. And so it's in the moment when you are believing, it's everything.
Yeah, 100%.
Getting married in the temple is everything. And me personally, I can't speak for you. I kind of feel slightly bad for this, but because it was so important religiously in that moment, I didn't really even think about those that were being left out. It wasn't really even a thought in my mind. I just thought, well, I'm doing what God wants me to do. Therefore, sorry for you unworthy people that can't be in the temple with me, or that you're too young and haven't done the things that are required to get in there. I look back now and I feel bad that I didn't really even think much about other people. It was just, I mean, granted, in the moment, it's the most important is the two of us, right? We're getting married,
and we were young too. We were 23.
Yeah. But I wish there was, and things did change in the church not too long after we got married. But looking back, I wish there would have been a way to involve people more.
Yeah, and I'm curious, and like leave in the comments too, because I know that the temple, even in a lot of other religions, people aren't really excluded from marriages, I don't think, the same way that it is within the LDS church in the temple. So kind of leave in the comments, are there other religious groups that would keep family apart during a wedding ceremony, or ceremonies that are separate for only those that are the most righteous, believing, tithe-paying members that could keep them from getting to see like their own daughter married? Let me know, because a lot of times when we do this show, I feel like a lot of times there's way more similarities than I realize. And so sometimes I feel alone, like, oh, that's just my experience. Maybe other people have experienced something similar. So let us know.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we'll hear from people in countries across the world and say, oh my gosh, we had a similar situation, a similar experience. And we're like, wow, it's just so crazy how so many people from all walks of life have connections in ways where we can relate to each other. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I will say, at least we got to marry for love.
Yes.
Because as Cody reflected on his marriage and his wedding day with Christine, you could see how sad he was about it for a whole different reason. He was talking about, not the traditions, like Sam said. In those moments, like our marriage day in the moment was still the happiest day ever, because the pride of feeling like we were doing what was right was so great, and that's what mattered most to us, right? We're looking back with sadness, but in the moment it was mostly happy. And Cody's looking back on this day and he's like, it was never good enough, and I could feel it. And he was talking about like having a hard time even getting off of work, and then him having like a mess at home and 2 other wives, and just that the whole day was just sad because like any woman deserves more than what Christine and Janelle got in their marriages, and how he felt like it was an obligation. Like he was getting married out of obligation, not out of love to Christine. And that's something that the AUB, a lot of Mormon polygamous groups, whether it's in the FLDS and it's just completely arranged, so they don't even know each other beforehand, or it's the AUB, like with Cody, where he's feeling like there's a certain obligation to have a certain number of wives, maybe, right? Or that it's an honor to have another woman want to be part of your family, so you just have to say yes.
Right.
Whatever that is, those obligations now are like tainting from the very beginning. It's tainting the wedding part of it, which is very like minimal to begin with. But then also you're going into that marriage with those expectations and that burden of the religious pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. And my first thought was, man, it's got to be hard for Christine. It's got to be sad for Christine to hear Cody talk about this and how, it was so hard to get off work. It was just this burden to have to go and marry another wife. I mean, of course, that's got to hurt, right, Christine? But at the same time, I also, if I take myself back into my fundamentalist days growing up in the FLDS church, I have to acknowledge that maybe Christine isn't that shocked. Maybe it's not even a surprise. Maybe that's why she's so excited to plan for a fun, big wedding of her dreams, because she was never expecting to have anything special. She always dreamt of being the third wife. She knew what was to come, which meant in secret, very small, this husband will have been married multiple times already. I think she probably expected it to happen similar to the way it did, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. It was interesting this episode watching Cody shift from angry Cody, or as Robin said in this episode, his murder face, angry Cody all the time. There was a lot of sadness in this episode. You know, he talked about the sadness with his wedding with Christine. He talked about how it was just more sad instead of angry, even as he was helping Meri to move. He was talking about, you know, things were more lighthearted and fun. But even when they sat down, he said, you know, it still makes me sad. Like the ship crashed and that is sad. And I feel like he's like going through those stages of grief.
Well, it's funny because he's doing it a little different though. His first stage was anger and now it's sadness. Isn't it normally the other way around? You're sad and then angry?
I don't know. We need to look that up.
In this case, he was very angry about it all. I think that he was witnessing before his own eyes as the captain of the ship. People may not like that I say that, but within the religion that they came from, Cody was the captain of the ship. And as the captain, he was seeing people unhappy and jumping overboard. And
just to get off the ship.
And so he was angry. I think he was like, you know, I've guided this ship for you for all of these years. How dare you not think this is enough for you? I think he's angry about all of that, and then how it's going to make him look to the other captains when he reaches shore. and so he was angry, and now he didn't reach shore. The whole thing just sunk and crashed, like he says, and will admit now. And you can see the sadness in his eyes as he realizes, I just completely forgot to avoid that iceberg. And anyway, so it's definitely seeming like as he talks, he's looking defeated at this point.
Yeah. But I also think that on the other side of that, like on the other side of his sadness a little bit, was like Meri's decided to move back to Parowan, which makes sense. We've all thought that she should have done that for a very long time, right? And Cody's helping her move. And as he's processing that like a little bit of sadness, also he's like, man, it was nice to be able to joke around with his best friend and Meri's sister. And they're moving and they're having this relationship of like such less pressure. And watching them be able to, I think Meri just being like, I'm not having to expect anything of you. You're just some friend that's coming to help me move. Yeah. Now, you're not my husband, so I'm not expecting you to pack. I'm not expecting you to take charge of this or do that. I'm just accepting of your help and being grateful for your help, and that's it. And man, like that whole interaction between them was like so different. And Cody even said, which cracked me up, because he was like, it's finally comfortable again. Why couldn't it have been comfortable 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 6 years ago? Yeah. Well, Cody, would you like an answer to that question? Because I think we have it for you. I think everybody who's watching could tell us why it hasn't been comfortable for so long. And it was all the expectations.
And, clearly Cody and Meri have been in this weird place for a very long time.
So long.
So him going and helping her as a friend, basically, isn't anything new. 6 years ago when he was helping her move, they were in this place where they weren't intimate. They weren't in a marriage necessarily. So it was kind of like just going and helping a friend. It's just that now they are able to have fun and joke about everything because they're not trying to make the other person feel like they
are still in a relationship when they're not.
Yeah. There's no pressure there. There's no pressure at all. And so I think Meri especially is finally free to just be herself, not be concerned about it, and that makes the whole situation a lot more light.
Well, and I think too, like Meri being herself is a huge piece of that, because she even said, she's like, the thing is, Cody doesn't know me. Cody hasn't been around. He hasn't been a friend. He hasn't been a husband for so many years. And she, every time he's around, has had to walk on eggshells or try to figure something out. And now she's just getting to like be herself, because it doesn't matter when she's not with them anymore. Like they're divorced. They're divorced in the eyes of the church. They got divorced legally years before that, which did get brought up again because she mentioned, she's like, yeah, even the other wives were worried that when that divorce happened, things would change, and things did change.
Yeah.
Right. And things were already bad even before that between him and Meri. And I think she did it as like a self-sacrificing, like, I think she had great intentions in doing it. I think she was hoping that it would like prove her worthiness a little bit. And it didn't help in that aspect, I think, the way that it should have. I think she was hoping that Kody would be so grateful to her that it could fix their relationship, and it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to wonder if Meri were to go back, Meri, if you're out there and you want to get on and answer this question for us, that'd be amazing. But if Meri were to go back, I wonder at what point, how many years ago did she realize that it was never going to be the same, quite the same? Because it seems like from what we hear and what we've seen before the show even started, that Meri and Kody were in a great relationship at one point. Was it when Janelle came into the family that everything started to change in that very moment? Was it before Janelle? Was it after Christine? I wonder, and I also have to wonder because Meri was the one that suggested that Kody pursue Robin as another wife. Tells me 100%, no questions here, it tells me Meri was not happy. In that moment, Meri was not happy with her relationship with Kody. In order to say something like that, like, oh, hey, I would almost rather have a new wife in here to be friends with than have to deal with you, Kody. Why don't you go see if you can bring her into the family, right? Mm. And I know that obviously bringing Robin in blew up the whole thing, but even before Robin, we know that Kody and Meri were not having a good relationship.
I know. Kody now is trying to say that it was like right from the very, very, very beginning that they got married too young, they didn't know each other, and that they were just oil and water right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. He talks about the fact that Christine coming in helped a lot because then you had Meri and Janelle who were going at it, not having a good relationship, and Christine kind of evened that out a little bit. But I think it's interesting you mention Robin because they also, again, this was the episode of weddings. They talked about Robin's wedding a lot as well because Kody was talking about with sadness what it was like to marry Christine, right? And he talked about the fact that Janelle and Christine did not have the marriages that any girl deserves, any woman deserves, that it should have been different and that he wished it had. And then comes along Robin, and I was always under the impression in real time that Robin wanted this big wedding, that it was almost like how Christine is now, where she wants the wedding that she deserves. It felt to me like this was Robin's like second chance. This is my true love. I want the wedding that I want.
Yeah.
But everybody kept saying, she was saying, that's not what I wanted. I wanted something small. I didn't want it to be a big deal. Then Kody says it. So then I look at Sam and I'm like, well, I don't know if I trust it just because Robin and Kody say it.
Did they talk about this before the interview?
Yeah. Was this like, did they come up with this together? And then Christine mentions the fact that Robin was an amazing plural wife in that moment and was so good at making the wedding not about her and making it about everybody, and that was something that she thought Robin did amazingly well.
Yeah, which brings it back to the fact that this is all a show. It's reality TV here, and I'm under the impression that the show is what kind of egged on the big celebration.
Yeah, well, and Kody was saying, I didn't want to hide anymore. I wanted, Robin to have a wedding that he could look back on and not be sad about, that he could feel like it was a celebration, especially since he loved her so much, right? Or loves her so much.
Yeah, that's true. It would have been Kody pushing it on a little bit too. That would also make sense. Yeah.
But I do think you're right in that if the show, and let us know what you guys think too, but like in the show aspect, Cody's coming out as an open polygamist. I don't want to hide anymore. I'm out here in the open, letting the world know. Okay. Then you're not going to have a small, intimate AUB wedding. And then what are you going to show? The camera with the dark screen that says no cameras were allowed in during this wedding. No, they're going to try to monetize that, publicize it. I think it went hand in hand.
You know what I find interesting is that, and maybe someone from the AUB can help us answer this question. From the beginning, they were told not to do the show. The AUB leadership told them, don't do the show.
Yep.
So they do the show because, who cares? So they do the show, and then they marry Robin, and Robin and Kody are still married within, they have the church ceremony sealing within their temple.
That's true, they did, yeah.
How? If they were told not to do the show by the leadership, and then they just did it anyway, they ignored their...
I don't know if that would keep them out of a temple ceremony, though.
No? If it was going against the church's recommendation, maybe I'm just thinking too much about the FLDS, where if Warren Jeff says, hey, don't do something, and someone did it anyway, they wouldn't be welcome around the church at all. So maybe that's where my mindset goes.
I think the AUB is more like the mainstream Mormon church in the fact that like you can go to your bishop and ask for recommendations or help with things in life, but ultimately those are your decisions. And then you have like the temple, which has a very clear set of rules that you need to follow religiously in order to enter. So if they were still active AUB members, even if they hadn't followed the church's counsel, that's not going to be the same as kicking them out.
And in that moment, they were still speaking very highly of their church, and they were still, doing the church meetings in home and things like that. So maybe they hadn't got to the point, right? Maybe they hadn't got to the point where there would have been any problem between them and the church. Good point.
Yeah. But watching that again, there still is those specific pressures, right? Whether it's from, I don't know, this entire time that Sam and I were talking about how we were going to discuss this episode, I'm like, it really comes down to pressures, whether it's religious pressure, he's marrying Christine, even though he doesn't want to, whether it's religious pressure of he needed to marry his first wife young and quickly because he didn't want to fall into sin and be unworthy, right? We kind of fall a little bit into that, even though I love you and wanted to be with you forever. I also, if 3 months felt like a long time, okay? That's all I'm saying, to be pure.
Yeah. It's the natural way of things, of course. I mean, there's nothing to hide about that. It's very, very much a normal thing.
Yes. But those are all like religious pressures to getting married quickly, right? And then you have the pressure that Kody was feeling of, okay, well, now I want to show the world. Robin wanted a small wedding. Now Robin's pressured into a big wedding in order to please Kody, to be able to show the world openly that polygamists can be married to and stand for something. And then their weddings as well. The pressure of now that they were sealed in a religious ceremony, how long did Meri get dragged on? Because Kody didn't want to fail at something that was supposed to be eternal.
Well, he even says that. He even says, Jesus says not to get, or did he say Jesus or Christ, in the Bible?
Yeah,
he said,
Christ says not to.
Christ says not to get divorced. And so he pulled back from his early memories as a younger boy and how he always thought that divorce was like the worst possible thing you could ever do, like this big sin. And then this many years later, it sounds like, or at least this is one of his excuses for it all, he held on to Meri for so long because he didn't want to fall into sin and actually get a divorce. Yeah. So I don't know how true that is. It sounds slightly like an excuse to me, but I guess I can't be the judge here.
Yeah. So there's religious and cultural pressures into the weddings themselves, religious and cultural pressure into how long you stay in a marriage that's been failing for years purely because you don't want it to fail because it's supposed to be an eternal covenant, right? And that's something I remember being told getting ready to get sealed into the temple, that our marriage was supposed to mean more than anybody else's marriage on the earth, right? Like that sealing is an eternal sealing. Everybody else's ceremonies end with the words, "Till death do you part."
Yep.
And we were constantly taught, that was used all the time. Theirs is till death do you part. Yours is for eternity. So you're supposed to work harder on a marriage. You're supposed to value it more, take care of it more. And I know that there were a lot of people who were pressured into staying into marriages, even in the mainstream LDS church, much longer than they should have, whether it was abusive or otherwise, because of that pressure that this is what... like you made an eternal commitment, not just to that person, but to God. And you don't want to let down God.
And this eternal commitment can go two ways. One way is what the church would hope the direction it would go, is that if you have rocky times and some difficult times in this life, that's okay because God will help you sort those out. And in the next life, things will get better as we progress and become more like God. Things will become easier and better in our relationships.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, people are getting married and they're thinking, maybe a couple years down the road, they're not getting along with each other and they're thinking, eternity with this person? I don't really want that, and so it can go the other way if people are thinking about it eternally.
Well, and Kody even mentioned, he goes, I do not want to be tied to these women for eternity. And it would be a disservice to them if God made them do that either, right? So even though he doesn't even believe in the religious aspect anymore, which is pretty clear, Meri got a spiritual release, so she's definitely not sealed. Christine is, because she says, I don't prescribe to that belief anymore, so they can say I'm sealed and I don't believe I am. But even Kody said, he's like, that's not what anybody would want. And so he's kind of just more in the hopes that like God will sort that out, right? That God would just not make them sealed to each other for eternity because of a religious ceremony. But technically, according to that religion, they are.
Well, because according to that religion, these marriages were sanctioned by God. And he doesn't make mistakes. Therefore, it is your fault, Kody, and wives, that it didn't work out. It's, and so he's kind of made it clear that he doesn't believe in the religion like he used to. So I don't think he is as concerned about whether or not it was sanctioned by God that they got married and all of that. But if you were still believing, that would have to be a very deep concern that someone would have, that, wow, I'm going against what God told me to do.
Yeah, or what I promised God to do.
Yeah.
Even more than what he told. Then I promised and said that I would.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of a deepness to all of this. But our weekly question that we have for you all is, did any of you get pressured into a certain type of wedding? Okay, did you get pressured? What did you get pressured to have it be bigger than what you wanted, smaller than what you wanted? Did you have to follow certain religious constructs that you necessarily did or didn't want? What did that look like for you? Is it just a Mormonism thing, or do y'all have experiences with that as well?
Yes,
please let us know in the comments.
Very, very curious to hear your thoughts on this as well. Thank you all so much for being here with us again. We look forward to talking with you soon.
We'll talk to y'all soon.